You're listening to 90.9 Life FM on this Wednesday morning. I'm Donna Jean, and I mentioned this a couple of times yesterday, but Hanukkah for our Jewish friends started last night at sundown. And I don't know how many of you know this, but Stan, the movie man, who is with us quite a bit talking about faith-based movies, he's actually a Messianic believer, and he's on the line with me right now to talk a little bit about Hanukkah. Good morning, Stan. How are you?
Well, good morning, Donna. Of course, I'm a Messianic Jewish believer. That means I'm Jewish by birth, and I believe in Jesus, Yeshua, as being the Jewish Messiah.
Well, Stan, we were talking off the air moments ago, and I was kind of chuckling because when I was a girl growing up, I really thought Hanukkah was the Jewish Christmas, but that is not the case. So explain that to listeners. They might have the same belief that I did for so many years.
Oh, absolutely. Hanukkah is a totally distinct holiday. It's a historic holiday. It's based on some events, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes, that happened in about 165 BC in Israel. And it's celebrating this victory that the Jews experienced against some very, very wicked people. And that's it. So it's been celebrated for thousands of years.
Well, Stan, how do we greet our Jewish friends and wish them a happy Hanukkah? What's the customary greeting?
Well, first of all, let me say how you pronounce it. We say Hanukkah, but in the Hebrew, it's Chanukah. That's why sometimes you'll see it with a CH, but that's the guttural. So it's just happy Hanukkah.
Well, before we go into the next break, and I'm going to go back into music and then talk with you one more time, tell us, how do Jews observe Hanukkah today?
Well, the main thing is we light the Hanukkah candles, and that's on what we call the menorah, or a Hanukkah, and it has 8 lights plus a center one called the shamas, the servant light. And you basically start off the first night, you have the shamas each night, you light 1, then the next night you light 2 lights, 3, and on to 8 lights. So, and we'll explain in the next segment why that's done. And the other thing is we have traditional foods like latkes, which are potato pancakes. Why? Because they're fried in oil, because the menorah, the candles were lit with oil, and that deals with the miracle of Hanukkah. Yes, and they give gifts, they celebrate. It's a celebration. And one of the traditional foods, Donna, and actually I didn't know this growing up because we didn't do it in our family, is jelly donuts.
Jelly donuts, yum, yum.
Because fried in oil, wonderful excuse for something sweet.
Oh, so did you do that at your house? I know you have 11 children, and you've been celebrating Hanukkah with them for many, many years. What did you guys do as traditions in your house?
Well, we would light the candles. Mm-hmm. We would have latkes when we could. We would give gifts. Can you imagine giving gifts for 8 nights?
To 11 kids? Boy, that's a lot.
Right. Well, we kind of compromise. But we give gifts. The other traditional thing they do is they play with the dreidel. Dreidel is a little top. And you play with the dreidel, and you kind of gamble with it, usually with Hanukkah gelt, Hanukkah money. And you can actually see that at some of the stores. In the Jewish section, they'll have these little gold-wrapped chocolate coins. And we'll talk about that. The dreidel has something to do with the history of Hanukkah.
Oh, good. Well, hey, if you're just tuning in this morning, we're talking to Stan Goldenberg, known to us as Stan the Movie Man. But today he is talking about the significance of Hanukkah, which started at sundown last night and will continue for 8 days, right? This morning.
8 days.
He's really not a guest to our airwaves. He is Stan the Movie Man, Stanley Goldenberg. And today he's not doing anything for movies. He is talking to us about Hanukkah, which started last night at sundown. Hey, Stan, welcome back, and I am learning so much from you today about the celebration of Hanukkah. But what is the history of the holiday?
Well, basically, the history of the holiday is that around 168 BC, that this Greek king of Syria, basically a Seleucid king, came in to Israel, took over, and started outlawing all the Jewish rituals, ordered the Jews to worship the Greek idols. They tried to Hellenize the Jews. It was a horrible thing. He basically tried to totally wipe out Judaism from that land. And then he set up a statue of Zeus in the temple, actually with his face on it, and started destroying the sacred scrolls and sacrificed pigs on the altar. So this was abhorrent to the Jews. There's all sorts of other stuff that happened, but finally Mattathias, who was a former Jewish priest, high priest, and his son Judah, who they nicknamed Judah Maccabee, which means the hammer, rose up, and this little band of Jews drove them out and defeated them. So 3 years later, 165 BC, on the 25th of Kislev, which is what last night was, or today, 25th of Kislev, they finally had driven them out and cleansed the temple from all these defilements. And the reason we light the lights is because it is told that there was only enough of the sealed oil, pure oil, to light the lights in the temple for 1 day. And somehow they lasted for 8 days. There's other reasons we hear it lasted for 8 days, is they were not allowed to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, Feast of Booths, back in the fall because of Antiochus Epiphanes. So they celebrated this for 8 days like they would have celebrated the Feast of Booths. But it was a great celebration. They finally got the temple back. And here's some of the significance for believers today, is that very temple that they cleansed is the temple that Jesus walked into about 165 years later, was dedicated in that temple and walked in that temple. And if Judaism had been wiped out in that area, we wouldn't have had Jesus coming. Let me say another very significant thing is that in the book of Daniel, most biblical scholars believe that one of the kings that Daniel prophesied about, he prophesied about all these kingdoms and kings, and in Daniel chapter 11, he talks about somebody, and most people feel that that person, starting in verse 21, represented Antiochus Epiphanes, the very king that is in the story of Hanukkah. Yes, but the more interesting thing is that as soon as it gets done with Antiochus Epiphanes, it switches to someone who couldn't be Antiochus, and that's the Antichrist. Antiochus was almost like a picture of the Antichrist. He defiled the temple. Remember in Matthew, Jesus talked about setting up the abomination of desolation in the holy place? That's also what Antiochus did, and that's what the Antichrist will do.
Wow.
One more significance for believers today, most people don't know, Hanukkah is in the New Testament. In John chapter 10, verse 22, Jesus was at Jerusalem during the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter. Guess what the word in Hebrew for dedication is? Hanukkah. So Jesus was at Jerusalem during Hanukkah. I'll give you one more thing. It's also called the Festival of Lights. And in John chapter 8 and John chapter 9, preceding when he was there for Hanukkah, Jesus stated, "I'm the light of the world." So all this exciting stuff.
Yeah,
and
so enlightening this morning. Thank you, Stan.
It is. It's so exciting. And believe me, as I restudy it, I learn things. Also, Hanukkah, they cleanse the temple. And I look at it time to examine myself, to cleanse my temple, of things that defile.
Yes,
it's the time
we
to
should
look
always be doing that. That's right.
Absolutely. Light fresh fire in us, God. Cleanse us. Light fresh fire. Fill us with your oil, because they didn't have candles back then. They used oil. So it's just an exciting time. So we say to everybody out there, Happy Hanukkah.
That's right. Happy Hanukkah to you and your family, Stan, and to all of us, really, because this is a big thing in the Bible. And we all need to be celebrating, really, right?
Absolutely. And listen, since I'm Stan the Movie Man, I will mention a movie, and that is that next Tuesday night in select theaters, there's going to be a Jewish musical comedy, and it's called Meshuggah Nutcracker. And it's using the music of the Nutcracker to basically tell the story of Hanukkah. So people can go there. It's a very Jewish presentation. Maybe tell your Jewish friends. They'll really enjoy it. And believers will find it interesting as well. It's called Meshuggah Nutcracker. They can look at fathomevents.com for more information.
All right. Well, some exciting things today. And we do appreciate you enlightening us about Hanukkah. And again, Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you.